Hi, everybody. Good morning. We're going to get started here. This is Leslie Mortensen. I am one of the volunteers for Adoptee Hub for the events committee. Thank you for joining Adoptee Hub's June event today. We're so excited. We wanted to focus on healing and reflection and hope that today's event will help you if you're looking at yoga as an outlet. We are lucky to have Kara with us today. She not only has her certification in yoga instruction, but also her PhD in environmental sociology. She has taught a wide variety of classes, including restorative vinyasa, power, core training, and yoga for competitive athletes. She strives to create a welcoming, inclusive, and safe environment that works with everyone from beginners to Olympic athletes. And she's also happy to answer any questions and concerns during her yoga practice today and looks forward to having you in her class. I'm honored to welcome my fellow Adoptee Hub member, Kara. Thank you for being here.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to Adoptee Hub's first Introduction to Yoga workshop. So let's go ahead and get started. So welcome, and so I was adopted from South Korea in 1986. I use she, her pronouns. And I am certified by the Yoga Alliance, and the certification is called RYT 200. So RYT refers to Registered Yoga Teacher, and 200 refers to a 200-hour level certification. And as Leslie said, I'm trained in multiple styles of yoga, and I'll talk about some of the different styles. Today, my specialties are Iyengar and yoga for competitive athletes. So we're going to have a lecture on yoga topics such as the history of yoga, the different styles of yoga, the benefits of yoga, etc. And then that will be followed by about a 40-minute yoga sequence. So we're actually going to get up and get moving and do a little bit of yoga practice today. And if you do have any questions, you're always free to use the chat function. I will try and save some time at the end after our practice. If anyone wants to, stay on and chat and ask any questions. And also after the event, you'll be receiving a pamphlet that has some resources for you, some links, and all sorts of good stuff. And I also do want to just briefly thank the wonderful Adoptee Hub volunteers and also the Yogasana studio here in Oakland, California. So let's start with what is yoga. So linguistically, yoga comes from the word yoke or union. So most yoga teachers will talk about the union between the mind, body, and spirit. And that's really the common denominator for anything that you would call a yoga practice. And I like this visual here with the cows. So a yoke, which isn't a commonly used word, is actually this device that is holding the two cows together. So I won't dive too deep into the history, but yoga does have its origins in ancient India and also in Hinduism and Buddhism. So there's a text called the Rig Veda, which is actually the oldest religious text still in use. And it comes from about the 2nd millennium BCE. So it's quite old. And you'll hear this word Veda or Vedic a lot in yoga. And that is the Sanskrit word for knowledge. And so yoga is one way to achieve knowledge. And it's really central to a lot of these early Vedic texts. Such as the Rig Veda. Another foundational texts are called the Upanishad. But really, when we think about the modern practice, the kind of theoretical foundation of yoga, it was really outlined in a more concrete way in the Yoga Sutras of Patanjali. And these were compiled around 400 BCE. So when most yoga teachers start their teacher training, what they really usually start with is the Yoga Sutras of Patanjali, and they're widely available. You can actually buy them and read them yourself if you're interested. So another concept that's important in yoga is called Ayurveda. And you may hear this term, it's becoming more popular as sometimes it's thought of as an alternative medicine. And in Sanskrit, it means the science of life. And it really is a holistic system of healing for the mind, body, and spirit. And it emphasizes balance and harmony between all the elements of the universe, and balance, within your own self as well. And so yoga is just one part of this system. And other aspects of the system include diet. So even as a yoga teacher, we learn a little bit about an Ayurvedic diet, and that stuff was really interesting to me. And this system of Ayurveda is something that really made a lot of sense to me when I did my teacher training. And so for me, it helps me kind of place yoga in this context of a healing. So like I said, yoga itself is quite old. And there are some styles of yoga still in use today that are very traditional to their kind of ancient roots. But of course, the use of yoga as fitness and the modern yoga industry are very, very modern. So there was a modern yoga renaissance in really the late 20th century. And many of the modern styles that are very popular were founded in this period. And this is where we really have the emphasis on the physical postures. And it spread throughout America and Europe, and now of course it's very global. And interestingly, one of the ways that it spread was through a few very influential people in Hollywood. So helpful term as we talk about the different styles of yoga. So an asana just refers to a physical posture or a pose. You might hear the term vinyasa, and vinyasa refers to a sequence of postures that flow together with your breath. So flow is really the useful term here. Hatha or hatha yoga. Sometimes you might see a class listed as a hatha yoga class, and it's really an umbrella term for any style which emphasizes the asanas. So in my opinion, it really doesn't tell you much about the class, so you'll want to inquire more, because hatha yoga can include a wide variety of the more kind of physical styles of yoga. Pranayama refers to the use of your breath. It's a little more complicated than that, but more or less, our breath is how we move this energy that's called prana through our body. So a lot of classes incorporate elements of pranayama. And because Sanskrit is the original language of yoga, many teachers, they may use a combination. And so you'll hear me today, some of the more common poses, I often use both the Sanskrit and the English translation, just so that people can kind of familiarize themselves with those commonly used asanas. So we're going to move through some of the common styles of yoga, and we're going to start. We're going to move through them in order from kind of the more meditative, less physical, to the more physical, more intense styles. So starting with these more meditative styles, there's a style called Yoga Nidra, and it's becoming more popular, and sometimes it's referred to as the yoga of sleep. So that's, again, it's a little more complex than that, but it can be useful for people who have, sleep disorders. It's all about kind of a state of deep, deep relaxation. Another very commonly taught style is restorative yoga. So this is very gentle, very slow. You are using the asanas, but it's more about relaxation than physical fitness. There's a style called Kundalini, which I had to practice as part of my training. And you're not moving very much, but it is very energetic. So you're seated, but you are moving the energy through your body, and sometimes it actually can be a kind of intense emotional experience. So it's an interesting style of yoga if you want to try it. And finally, there is Yin Yoga, which I have it under a meditative style because you are not moving very much, but you are. It is a little bit physically intense. You are holding a series of asanas for several minutes, so it can actually be kind of physically challenging. So moving on to these more physical styles. So I mentioned Iyengar, and this is really a foundational style. It was founded by BKS Iyengar in 1966. And I recommend it as an intro to the physical postures. So it has an emphasis on alignment, precision, and safety. And what it's really known for, you're not going to be flowing like like you think of in a traditional yoga class. You might be doing some of the common poses, but in each pose, an Iyengar teacher is very hands-on, and they use a lot of. They're known for using props, using a hands-on teaching style. And I just want to mention that this lovely studio right here is an Iyengar studio. And so you'll see the wall behind me. These are some of the props and devices that are used in Iyengar that aren't used in many other styles. So, most yoga studios won't have this, this beautiful setup like this. And it is actually protected as a brand. So I would not call myself an Iyengar instructor. I'm trained in Iyengar methods. But an Iyengar instructor must be trained by an Iyengar institute or instructor. So Vinyasa or flow, I would say, is probably the most commonly taught style of yoga in most studios, but especially in a gym setting. So it can vary in intensity, and many of the more modern classes have a real focus on physical fitness. And like I mentioned before, you're going to be flowing, moving with your breath. And I recommend, before you jump into a Vinyasa class, just be aware, like I said, that it can vary in intensity. And you really should have a good understanding of the basic postures before taking a class, because sometimes they can move pretty quickly. So I would not recommend jumping into this, as a beginner, but certainly there are many, Vinyasa flow classes available, on YouTube, and I'll talk about some of those online resources in a bit. So moving on, power yoga, as the name suggests, is some people think of it as a type of Vinyasa. It was popularized by a pretty controversial figure, Baptiste, but there are actually several other people who are associated with popularizing power yoga. And it heavily emphasizes athleticism and fitness, as you can imagine. And these can, vary, but they are going to be on the more intense end of the spectrum, and they're, you're going to be moving pretty quickly. So this is really, not one of the more traditional styles. I, recommend it if you are a little bit more advanced and really looking to get kind of the physical fitness benefits out of yoga. So some other styles. So Ashtanga is, this is a very ancient and traditional style that informs many of the modern styles, such as, even power and Vinyasa does have its origin in Ashtanga yoga. So it is a prescribed set of postures, and you work your way up through this sequence into the more advanced poses. And it's very physically intense and rigid, both in its form and in the teaching style. So Ashtanga instructors have, a very distinctive way of teaching, and it's very hands-on. And I would not recommend this for beginners. It is, like I said, a little bit more advanced. So Bikram and hot yoga are related. So Bikram specifically was founded by Bikram Chowdhury in the 1970s. And Bikram is a prescribed series of asanas performed in a heated room. And I think the heat is about 102 degrees Fahrenheit, so it is quite warm. And similar to Ashtanga, but even more so, it's characterized by an intense and militaristic teaching style. So be prepared. When you go in a Bikram teacher, it can be quite intense if you're not used to it. So it's very popular. As my perspective as a teacher from a health and safety perspective is that it can be I caution that it can be physically dangerous going into a heated room, and if you're not accustomed to that, just be a little bit careful. Even me as an advanced teacher, if sometimes in Bikram classes I kind of get a little bit overwhelmed by the heat. So just be aware of that. Hot yoga is the kind of more umbrella term. So you could have a hot yoga studio that teaches Bikram, but you could also have a hot yoga studio that teaches pretty much any other style. Any style that's taught in a heated room can be called hot yoga. But a Bikram yoga studio or Bikram yoga class is something that's very, very specific. But you could take even a restorative class in a heated room. I've taken different kinds of classes that are done in a heated room. So I did mention some other modern styles. So you might have heard of brands like Core Power Yoga. Here in the San Francisco Bay Area, there's a Core Power Yoga studio on every corner, it seems like. So this is one of the more popular ones. This would be an example of a hot yoga studio. Most of their classes are done in a heated room. There's some hybrid styles like yoga lattes, which is a combination of yoga and Pilates. So you could actually be certified as a yoga lattes instructor. There are some performative styles. So these pictures here are me doing Acro Yoga. So that's a very, very modern style. It combines, as you can see, elements of acrobatics. It's usually done, with partners or in a group. And it's usually not regulated. It's not taught in studios. It's often kind of more community-based. So you meet up at a park. And again, my perspective, you'll hear me kind of talk a lot about safety. My perspective as a teacher is just to be a bit careful, because if you're in a park, and there's no one who's really trained in safety, as a teacher, sometimes, that makes me cringe a little bit. I don't want anyone kind of going to a park and trying to jump into these poses, and getting injured. Chair yoga is a type of what's called adaptive yoga. So yoga that can be adapted for people with limitations such as limited mobility. So chair yoga is often taught in nursing homes and settings where you're working with senior citizens, and there are many types of adaptive yoga. Yoga can be actually taught to children. So there are lots of resources. You can get your kids involved in yoga. You can go to studios where they have children's yoga classes. And I am here in California, so I'll mention Ganja yoga. So that is combining yoga actually with the consumption of marijuana. So there are some really kind of interesting and, like I said, very, very new and modern and interesting styles. So where to start? Because this workshop today is really designed for beginners. So this is a lot of information today, but if you do want to start your practice, either a home practice or a studio practice, here are some recommendations, because I get asked this a lot. I've said this before, don't I would not recommend diving into the more challenging styles, even if you feel like you are, pretty physically fit. You might start out with a restorative or a more, meditative class. And if you are interested in the physical styles, I recommend searching out an Iyengar studio. They are not available in every city, but that's a great way to really build a foundation. And you can also find Iyengar resources online as well. So there are too many sources out there on YouTube to count. Other different apps and stuff. So I'll talk a little bit about some of the ones that I recommend in a bit. If you do have a studio near you, give them a call, walk in, talk to some of their teachers, and just let them know, what you're looking for, and they should be able to point you in the right direction. So what to know before your first class, and this is really more for a in-studio class. So if you have any injuries or any concerns, you can arrive early and talk to the teacher and just let them know, even something as simple as, I prefer not to be touched. So a good yoga instructor will ask before they touch you and give you, instruction, with their hands. So if you prefer not to be touched, just let them know that. And you can certainly ask for props and modifications. So since I'm here in a studio, I want to talk a little bit about, introduce you to some props. So that's what we call these, any sort of, devices that you use to make a pose, more comfortable or adapt it to your needs. So some commonly used ones, this is called a bolster. So it's quite padded. And you can sit on it. You can use it for extra padding. You use it a lot for, meditation. This is a yoga block. So you can use it on all these different settings. So usually, you use it if you're to add a little bit of height. If you're going to put your hands, normally, you can't reach all the way to the floor or something like that. This is what you would use. This is a yoga strap, and it's used a lot for deepening poses where you're really stretching. And then finally, this is a yoga blanket. So it's a specific type of blanket that is pretty versatile, and we actually use it in today's practice. So if you feel like your joints are a little sensitive and you don't like kind of kneeling on the ground, then you can use any sort of blanket or even a pillow or something that's kind of folded. And these props, you'll find them in most studios, but they're actually pretty inexpensive if you want to buy them for your own home practice. And finally, when you're in the class, I always say that you know your body better than any teacher, even the most qualified advanced teacher. So if something that you're doing just doesn't feel right. Sometimes if you are a little bit shy, or you think, oh, this teacher is telling me to do something and so I should just do it. But if you kind of are monitoring your own self and know that this pose just isn't for you, just come out of it. You don't have to say anything. I always understand if I see a student who's just not going to do a specific pose, and that's okay. So we're going to talk about the benefits of yoga. So I'm going to focus on yoga for physical and mental health, but other aspects I thought I'd mention. So many people are drawn to yoga for their emotional and spiritual well-being. Many people also are drawn to yoga for a sense of community. So as we gather again in person, many studios emphasize this sense of community, and you can find some really great some of the local studios around here are really big on emphasizing that sense of community, which I think is really great. And then of course there's online yoga communities as well. And yoga, of course, can be used as a business. So the yoga industry in the US it's about a $12 billion a year industry. So if you are interested in becoming a yoga teacher, there's all sorts of ways to do that. You don't have to teach at a studio, but I have lots of resources, even if you wanted to be, your own, independent instructor and have kind of your own side business. I have lots of resources for that. So let's talk about yoga and physical health. And just a disclaimer here, yoga teachers do study anatomy and physiology, but a lot of times I have to tell people I cannot give medical advice. So if you're going to come to a yoga teacher and say, I have, I have this problem, can you help me? I'm going to be very careful about, saying, oh, please, please talk to your, your doctor about any sort of, specific physical problem that you're having. But many people are motivated to practice yoga to improve their physical fitness. So of course, there's research on this, and you can, improve your cardio fitness. You can use it as strength training, and of course, flexibility. So these are kind of common, motivations to practice yoga. And there's also a lot of research on yoga for different kinds of physical illnesses. So I have some resources that will be distributed after the class. So a lot of people are also drawn to yoga for for mental and emotional health. So similar to the research on yoga and physical health, there is a lot of research on yoga as part of a treatment for anxiety, depression, PTSD, sleep disorders, but even more and more severe mental illness like schizophrenia. There is actually a growing body of research, and yoga is usually studied in conjunction with things like meditation or mindfulness as a complement. And so I would never say that yoga is a cure for any physical or mental illness, but it can be used to complement other types of treatment. And there's also some pilot programs for yoga in settings where people deal with a lot of stress and even things like violence. And I think this is really great and interesting research. So yoga in prisons, schools, in places where students are dealing with things like violence. And so I think, again, this is really, a promising field of research. So other less tangible benefits. So one thing that I really took from my yoga teacher training and from my own practice is learning to be present. So, like many people, I tend to really fixate on the past and the future. So kind of a radical shift in perspective was really valuable to me. So, taking that hour or however long you're going to devote and really, like I said, shifting your perspective to really be present in, in your body and, in that moment was something that was really transformational for me. And so I have a permission to be selfish here, and maybe there's a word for it, but many of us, we have so many demands on us. And so we don't have opportunities, many opportunities. You hear the term self-care, but really, if you set aside the time for your yoga practice and really give yourself permission to kind of shut out everything else and really, turn inward, sometimes that can be hard when we're not, when we're so conditioned to always be kind of thinking about, other people, but being able to turn inwards and giving ourselves that permission, can be really powerful. So, on that note and relatedly, I talked about turning inwards. So I'll tell you a little bit about my own journey. So I was a competitive gymnast for many years growing up. And so kind of the mindset of being not just an athlete, but a gymnast in particular. Gymnastics is one of those sports where you are judged, right, based on some external standards. So, the standard of what this move in gymnastics should look like. Very specific, very rigid. You have to have your toes pointed and your legs straight and at the specific angle, right? And so you have to meet that external standard, right? And so I think when people hear that I was a gymnast, they assume that I'm drawn to yoga to do the more kind of athletic poses. But to me, when you think about yoga as those the impressive poses, when you see images online where the yogi is kind of bended all over and you think, oh wow, that looks so impressive, that's what yoga is, right? I was drawn to yoga to kind of get away from that mindset, get away from the competitive mindset where you're really being judged on some external standard. So for me, a yoga pose should never be about, does it look right? Does it look impressive, right? Is my leg all the way up here, right? To me, the essence of yoga and what's difficult for a lot of people is getting away from that kind of those external pressures. So for me, a yoga pose is, what does this feel like? So maybe my leg isn't going to be all the way up here, but does it feel good, right? And and any type of yoga that feels competitive, right? To me, is really it's not, there are certainly places where competition can be beneficial for us, but yoga to me should never feel competitive. And finally, I want to talk about a related note. So I want to talk about inclusivity in yoga, because like I said, when you see those images of yoga and you think yoga is about these really interesting impressive looking poses, and the stereotype, right, of yoga that is for young, slim, very flexible people, it's that image of yoga, I think, is really harmful, right? And I think it really discourages a lot of people. So a lot of people are kind of intimidated even just going into a yoga studio where they see people who kind of fit this stereotype, and if they see that and then they think, oh, I'm not flexible like that, right? I don't look like that, right? So I think, like I said, that can be really harmful. And there's a lot of discussion about how yoga as an industry, right, needs to be more inclusive in many, many different ways. And you might hear the term body positivity, and I want to talk about, or I prefer the term body neutrality, right? Yes, yoga can be a way to celebrate our bodies, but really, I think there's a shift towards, like I said, what's called body neutrality in the yoga and in the kind of broader fitness industry, where you don't have to kind of force this positive aspect, right? Some days you might not, want to feel so positive about your body, but yoga can be one way to achieve kind of a more, you can appreciate your body and what it does for you, kind of in a more neutral way. So I have lots of resources when in my own, teaching, I do try and have a focus on inclusivity. So let's talk about adoption. So first of all, when I talk about adoptees as a community, I do recognize the diversity in the adoptee community, and how we all have our own, individual stories and journeys and, feelings about adoption. So, I'm going to generalize a little bit, but I do hope that you take that with a grain of salt. But I do, I'm becoming more involved in the adoptee community, especially online and in wonderful organizations like Adoptee Hub. So I have taken the time to really listen to a lot of other adoptees and really inform myself about some of the issues that are common to many of us in the adoptee community. So how can yoga benefit us specifically as adoptees? So there is no research. I looked far and wide, and that's not surprising. There is just kind of a lack of research generally on adoption and adoptees. I do draw a lot on the body of research on yoga for trauma. So there is quite a good deal. That is a growing body of research and practice. So you have some studios and yoga teachers who that is specifically their focus. And so I think I make the connection because for many adoptees, we deal with different kinds of trauma, throughout our lifetime. And, as a subset of yoga for trauma, there is also yoga for things like grief and loss. So I think about, maybe adult adoptees are going through reunion or something, difficult and painful, related to their adoption, and they can experience things like, grief and loss. And so maybe you turn to yoga specifically for that. And I want to talk about roots. So it's a common metaphor in yoga that we talk about, feeling rooted, grounded. We use these metaphors. There's a tree pose in yoga. And that concept can be really useful to us as adoptees because, maybe we have a sense of being uprooted, right, from our family, from our culture, right? And so, you can use yoga to ground yourself, right? To feel connected to something. Gratitude is also another very common theme in yoga. So, I tend not to use this language, but you might hear teachers say, let's set an intention of gratitude. That's very, very common. And for adoptees specifically, that can be a bit of an emotional term. Sometimes many adoptees have a complicated relationship with gratitude because it can feel like it is imposed upon us that, society believes that we should be eternally grateful for being adopted and towards our, adoptive families. And that's great if you do feel that. But you can use yoga as a way to kind of reclaim the idea of gratitude. So, you don't have to be grateful for being adopted, but there are many other things you can be grateful for, and you can focus on that in your practice. I would love to see more research on yoga for adoptees, and maybe even some programs. So, I could see building a program for yoga as an intervention for adopted children. So if you do have any thoughts or questions on this topic, I'm always happy. I'm very open to talking about this topic. So if you want to learn more, Yoga Journal is a really great resource. So you can subscribe to the actual magazine. But also Yoga Journal online is a really great resource. They're very accessible. They have lots of resources for beginners. So Yoga Alliance is the governing body that provides yoga teaching certifications. That's their main function, but they do have lots of resources. So even if you wanted to find a Yoga Alliance certified teacher, you can go to the Yoga Alliance itself. Yoga Basics online, if you just Google Yoga Basics, and it is on my list of resources, that's, as you can imagine, a great source for starting your physical practice. And then there's lots of stuff on social media. I can't sift through it all, but one account that I really like, you can find them on Instagram, is BOPO Yoga. So that stands for Body Positive Yoga. So a little preview of our practice today. So this is called a sun salutation. And it is the basis for many, Vinyasa classes. So if you can really master your sun salutation, you'll be in good shape to go into many yoga classes. So you start in a standing position, you move down to the floor, and then you move back up, and ideally you are flowing, right, with your breath. And traditionally, the sun salutation can be ritualistic. So I think we have the summer solstice coming up, or maybe I didn't miss it. But so one tradition is on the summer and winter solstice, performing 108 sun salutations. I don't know where that number comes from, but I participated in kind of a group ritual, and it can be really interesting and really powerful. And also just generally, since like many of you, I've spent a lot of the last year and a half seated, not moving as much as I'd like. So today's practice is also going to focus on opening ourselves up. I was really thinking about what would someone who has been kind of seated like this, what would they need to feel more open, not just kind of physically, but also more just energetically. So we're really going to open ourselves up in the areas where I feel like we might be feeling a little tight or a little closed off. So I'll also mention that yoga is traditionally done barefoot. So if you have any socks, unless they are special yoga socks, let's get ready for our practice. So we are going to find our mat. So we can end the screen share. Okay. So as we come to our mat, got to make sure that everything is nice and straight. So this is, I'm going to use a little blanket. I'm going to keep it handy. And I'll mention, but anytime when we're on the ground and you feel like you just want a little padding, just slide your blanket underneath your knees. So keep that handy. And we are going to come to the top, or the front of our mat. So you guys can find your position here. Just while we're getting started, I'm gonna stand here so that you have a good view, but you guys will be facing this way. So the first things first, in our Tadasana, mountain pose, we want to find hip width apart. So just kind of get your feet situated so that you feel like everything is stacked, everything on top of everything else. So so you don't want your feet this close, you don't want them really wide. So as we come into our Tadasana, mountain pose, this is really the foundational yoga pose. So we don't often get time barefoot to really think about our feet and using our feet as our connection to the earth. So you can kind of just start to rock back and forth, pick your toes up off the mat, widen your toes, a little bit, really kind of get yourself situated so that you are nice and even. You feel like you have a foundation on all four corners of your feet. And then from there, that nice foundation, bring everything else into alignment. So you may find that you have to tuck your tailbone in just a little bit. You don't want to be, leaning backwards quite yet. But for some of us, we need to make that slight adjustment to our pelvis. And then we're going to focus on our shoulders. So bring everything into alignment, and you can take your shoulders up to your ears and then away from your ears. So your shoulder blades are really kind of melting, but it should be nice and relaxed and easy here. And then your arms should be nice and relaxed by your side. Your palms can face inwards. And make sure that your hands, your fingers are nice and relaxed. Chin parallel to the ground. And you can close your eyes. I recommend closing your eyes in our Tadasana mountain pose. Starting to find your breath. So I'm going to come to the front of my mat now. So we can have our eyes closed, finding our breath. Inhale, exhale. And if I forget to say inhale and exhale, just remember, especially when we start moving, really don't forget to keep breathing. Inhale and exhale. And we're gonna take some shoulder circles. So we're gonna bring our shoulders up to our ears. You can keep your eyes closed if you'd like. And back and around. You can start to move with your breath. And reverse directions, shoulders up to your ears and forward, keeping your lower body stable as you do this. And back to your Tadasana. So standing nice and tall, eyes open. Take your right hand and you're gonna bring it up and over. So your torso and your body is gonna stay stable as you bring your right hand up and over, and you're gonna take your right ear to your right shoulder. And you're gonna keep your left shoulder really, really grounded so that you're not kind of starting to lean. So you get that nice stretch on your neck. Exhale, come out, and other side. Inhale, take your arm up, left hand to the side of your head, just very gently. And come out. Now we're gonna take our left hand, our left arm up and over, and now we're gonna take a gentle side bend. So really, you can press your right hip to the right side of the room, just very gently. You can take your gaze up to the ceiling. And on your next exhale, come back to center. Inhale, left arm up and over, really opening up the side body. And exhale, back to center. We're gonna take our arms in front of us. So clasp your hands, and you're gonna tuck your chin, and then your lower body stays stable, but you're gonna pull your shoulder blades away from one another. So tuck your chin and reach your arms forward, nice and long. And then you're gonna take your hands behind you. You're gonna clasp them at your lower back. So now the shoulder blades come together. You're gonna gently take your gaze up towards the ceiling. You're not in a full back bend yet, but you can start to really open up. And come back to center. And shake everything out. We can feel our bodies start to warm up a little bit. You can feel that energy flowing through our body, and find your foundation on your feet once again. And inhale, we're gonna take our arms up, and now we're gonna take a gentle back bend, palms facing each other. You can send your hips slightly towards the front of the room, whatever you're comfortable with here. And on your next exhale, bring your hands back down. We're gonna do that again. Inhale, take that slight back bend. Exhale. One more time, inhale. And this time, we're gonna take our palms facing down. and arms parallel, more or less, to the ground. Inhale, and on our next exhale, we're going to start to sit down into our chair pose. So your knees don't want to go too far over your toes. And we're going to start to sit down. You don't have to sit down too deeply, just about like this. This is our chair pose. And breathe. So we're really starting to move here, really starting to warm up. Take your arms behind you, clasp them at your lower back, shoulder blades together. And on your next exhale, you're going to keep your knees nice and bent. You're going to come up and over, exhale. So your chest is coming to your thighs. You're dropping your head. Only what you're comfortable with. Drop your head, let your head hang nice and heavy. And on your next exhale, take your hands. You're going to clasp opposite hand to opposite elbow. This is called Ragdoll. It's one of my favorite poses. So here in Ragdoll, really let gravity do the work. Let your elbows hang heavy. Let your head hang heavy. As much of a bend in your knees as you'd like. You can rock back and forth. You can see I'm kind of gently rocking back and forth on my feet. You can rock side to side. Or you can just hang out. So place your hands firmly on the mat. We're going to step back into tabletop. So here we really want to have 90 degrees as much as we can. So everything stacked, hip and shoulder width apart, toes tucked under like this. So we want to start from a nice flat, firm foundation as we move into our cat-cow. So we're going to inhale, drop our chin, and we're going to round our back. Exhale. Now we're going to drop our navel and bring our gaze up. Not sinking too much into this pose. Inhale, round. Exhale, moving through our cat-cow. One more time. Exhale. Coming back to center. So we're gonna keep our hips where they are. Keep your hips nice and high as you walk your fingers forward. Walk your hands forward, dropping your head onto the mat, sending your hips up nice and high, and really reaching forward, going for length here through your fingertips. Walking your hands back up to your tabletop. So as we come into our high plank, in our high plank, you want to make sure that you have a good foundation on your hands. You can spread your fingers nice and wide. In our high plank, we step our feet back. High plank, you're always welcome to take a plank, your high plank here with your knees on the mat. Chaturanga Dandasana. Exhale, we're going to slowly lower so you can be here. Lower down, elbows in. Tuck your toes under. Inhale, we're going to come into Sphinx Pose. So you can walk your hands forward, resting on your forearms, a gentle back bend here. So this is not our full upward facing dog. This is called Sphinx Pose. On your next exhale, come back down to your mat. And we're going to come all the way back into our child's pose. So seated, so you're going to be seated on your ankles more or less. And your hands, they should be nice and long, your arms nice and long out in front of you. Breathe. Child's pose is always an option. Wherever you are, if you ever feel like you want to come back to your child's pose, feel free. Relax your head. You can rest your head on the mat. And we're going to come back up through our tabletop and back into our high plank. So from here, we're going to Chaturanga Dandasana. Exhale. Inhale. This time we are going to come up a little bit higher into our upward facing dog. So this is a little bit more of a back bend. Lifting up and out of the shoulders. Exhale, we're going to tuck our toes and we're going to come into our first downward facing dog. So send those hips back. So in down dog, a lot of times we focus on the length through the backs of our legs, and certainly that is what we should be feeling, but we also want to take a moment to focus on this, our lower back, where a lot of us, might be feeling a little tight. So just to get that little bit of extra length, we're going to come up onto our toes, bend the knees. And so here, as we send the hips back, you might feel that little bit of length. So you really want to, make any adjustments, especially through your shoulders and through your lower back. Ideally, you want to think about one long line from your hands out through your tailbone. So you might not be exactly there, and that's okay. But if you're thinking about that length, you're getting the benefit. So now we're going to straighten our legs and lower our heels. So don't worry if you are feeling like you're not getting this exactly right. If you're feeling that length, then that's really what matters in your first down dog. Feel free to kind of pedal your legs a little bit and breathe. So we're gonna look towards our hands and we're gonna slowly walk our feet. So you'll need to bend your knees a little bit, that's fine. So we're gonna come into our forward fold. So take a breath or two to get situated in your forward fold, bending your knees as much as you'd like. Inhale, we're gonna come up into a nice flat back. So inhale, take your hands up onto your shins, nice flat back, reaching through the top of your head. Exhale, back down to forward fold. Inhale, we're gonna take our hands all the way up. You can take a slight back bend if you'd like. Exhale, bring your hands to heart center. And come back to your Tadasana. Find your breath. You can close your eyes for a second as we kind of find our foundation again. Feeling the energy moving through our body, feeling that we're nice and warm now. And we are ready to move through our first sun salutation, Surya Namaskar. So if you need to adjust yourself, sometimes I find that sometimes I wander a little bit from the front of the mat. You don't need to be all the way at the top. Okay, so take your hands to your side, make any adjustments that you need. And so through our sun salutation, you're gonna hear me say inhale and exhale with each movement. So here we go, inhale, arms up, you can take that slight back bend. Exhale, hands to the mat, forward fold. Inhale, halfway lift, nice flat back. Exhale, forward fold. Step back into your high plank, inhale. Exhale, lower down. Inhale, upward facing dog. Exhale, tuck your toes. Downward facing dog. And I like to take an extra breath here. Good job. And we're gonna look towards our hands, walk forward, forward fold. Then I like to exhale one extra breath in our forward fold. And then inhale, take the arms up. Exhale, hands through heart center. And then bring them back down. And again, inhale. And exhale, forward fold. Inhale, halfway lift. Exhale, hands to the mat. Step back. Exhale, lower down, chaturanga. Inhale, upward facing dog. Exhale, downward facing dog. And breathe. Step your feet forward. And exhale, forward fold. Inhale all the way up. And exhale, hands to heart center. We're going to add on some variations to our sun salutation. Inhale, arms up. Exhale, forward fold. Inhale, halfway lift. Exhale, forward fold. Take your right foot, step your right foot, reach it all the way back. So in our low lunge, knee over ankle. You can take a few breaths in here, making any adjustments, feeling the length in your low lunge. Inhale, we're going to take the arms all the way up. You should have a nice sturdy foundation in your lower body. Inhale, reach up, high lunge. Exhale, hands back down. Inhale, we're going to bring the left arm up, adding a little bit of a twist, reaching towards the ceiling. Exhale, back down to your low lunge, planting your hands, stepping back into your high lunge, lower down, chaturanga. Inhale, upward dog. Exhale, downward dog, sending those hips nice and high. Stepping forward, forward fold. Inhale all the way up. Exhale, hands to heart center. Nice job, other side. Inhale, arms up. Exhale, forward fold. Inhale, halfway lift. Exhale, forward fold. Step the left foot back, reach it back, nice and long, low lunge. Inhale, reach up, high lunge. Exhale, low lunge, hands on the mat. Inhale, right arm up, reach it towards sky. Exhale, hand back down, low lunge. Inhale, step back to high plank. Exhale, lower down, chaturanga. Inhale, lift up, upward facing dog. Exhale, downward facing dog. Walk forward, forward fold. Inhale, arms up. Exhale, hands to heart center. And breathe. So we're gonna take our left foot, we're gonna open up to the side. So you guys should be facing me now. So you want a little bit of a wide stance here, much wider than hip distance. So feet pointed out slightly, about a 45-degree angle, or about towards the edges of your mat, the corners of your mat. So we're gonna take our hands, you can have them wherever you'd like, wherever's comfortable. I'm gonna put them on my hips, and we come into a nice deep squat. Our knees wanna track our toes as much as possible. So you wanna make sure that you're not leaning too far back or too far forward. So you wanna start from feeling nice and tall. So shoulders open, chest open, and exhale, we're gonna start to come into, you might need to feel like you need to adjust your stance a little bit, and that's fine. So we're gonna come in, you can bring your hands to heart center if you're comfortable. You can bring them to wherever you feel like. And as you come forward, you might feel that you wanna lean forward a little bit, and that's fine. You'll kind of feel where's comfortable for you. So sometimes I like to come here with my forearms. So you don't want to squat all the way down. You don't want to squat more than kind of parallel to the ground. You might find that you want to kind of rock back and forth gently. And come back up. So we're going to take our left foot and we're going to bring it parallel to the back edge of our mat, and then 90-degree angle. So rotate your front foot. So you should still be facing this to this side of the room. Arms out, feeling length from fingertip to fingertip. Shoulders away from the ears, feeling nice and strong. Make sure you have a nice wide stance here as we come into our warrior two. Look toward your front fingertips. We're gonna start to bend our front knee so it should track, adjust as needed, track your knee in as much of a straight line as you can get with your toes. Try not to go more than 90 degrees. So I need to adjust a little bit here. So think of yourself as being between two panes of glass. So adjust as needed to kind of bring yourself into this nice straight line here in one pane of glass. Breathing, feeling the power of our warrior two. And inhale, we're gonna come up and we're gonna reverse it. So we're gonna turn that right foot in And then turn the left foot out. Giving your arms a break if you need for just a second. And warrior two on the other side. And coming back to the front of our mat, finding our Tadasana. And to come down to our mat, we're just going to take an inhale, exhale, plant the hands, forward fold. We're going to step back into our tabletop once again. Finding our tabletop. We're going to take our right hand. We're going to reach the right hand off the mat. Exhale, we're going to slide it through this space right here, bending the left arm and twisting, keeping our hips nice and high and nice and stable where they are. You can rest your head on the side of the mat. You can walk your left fingertips forward. And as you breathe, allow yourself to really sink a little bit into this pose, into those areas where you might feel that nice deep stretch. And on your next inhale, come back to your tabletop. Exhale, getting ready for the other side. Inhale, left arm up. Exhale, slide it through this space. Coming on to the left side of your head. Walking your right fingertips forward. Coming back into your tabletop. So here is where I recommend grabbing your blanket. So just about in the middle of your mat, place it under your knees. Coming up onto your knees, so you should still be hip width apart. So in our camel, this can be a little bit of a challenging pose, a challenging back bend. So here, as we come into our camel, we're not going to reach for our ankles, right? Because if we do that, we might go like this, right? To reach our ankles. That is not the goal. We're going to take our hands. You can take your hands right here on your lower back for support. And as we come into our camel, we're going to take our gaze up, send the hips forward. Now, a lot of times I like to practice against a wall. So if you can picture, as we draw our gaze up and come into the back bend, the goal isn't to sit back. The goal is to send the hips forward. So you might not be in a full back bend. You might not be anywhere near your ankles, and that is just fine for today. So gaze comes up. And exhale, gently come out of it. You can remove your blanket, and we're going to come into a wide-legged child's pose. So bring your knees. They don't have to be all the way to the outside of the mat. Wider than usual. Bring your big toes together. So as we sit back and come into our child's pose, you're really going for length through your fingertips. But it should be a nice and relaxed pose here. And breathe. gonna walk our hands over to the right side, more or less towards that front corner of the mat. So opening up the left side of the body. And walk the hands over to the other side, remembering to breathe. Hands back to the center and walk your hands, use your hands, come back up. And we're gonna swing our legs on around. Whew. Coming to a nice seated position, maybe shaking your legs out a little bit, feeling any sensations that are kind of happening in your legs right now. Finding your breath again. So we're gonna start in this nice seated position where our feet are planted nice and firmly on the mat. So you're gonna use your hands, your elbows to gently roll yourself on down, finding comfortable seated position. So you're gonna lift your right foot off the mat and take it into a figure four, like you were seated in an armchair. And as you lift your left foot off the mat, you're gonna reach your hands and clasp your hands in this space right here. And you're gonna find this nice figure four position, and you'll probably feel the outside of your right hip. For many of us, this area right here, we don't have a lot of opportunities to really get a nice stretch. And we're gonna come out of it, plant your foot, and we're gonna come right into the other side. So figure four with your left foot off the mat, and we're gonna lift the right foot off the mat now and reach, clasp your hands. Exhale, plant both feet back on the mat, arms out to the side, making sure to move anything out of the way. If you have anything on the sides of the mat here, just move it out of the way. And then we're gonna bring our knees are gonna drop to the mat, and our feet, the soles of our feet are gonna come together. So this is our reclining Badakanasana, butterfly pose, and we are feeling nice and open in this pose. You can close your eyes. You can bring your hands to your abdomen if you'd like, or leave them nice and open. Close your eyes and enjoy this feeling. And if you're feeling vulnerable or emotional in this pose, you can always come out of it, but it's nice to be able to recognize those feelings as they pass through us. Open your eyes. We're going to bring our knees back together and bring your feet off the mat. And we're going to come into our final spinal twist. So we're going to take our knees over to the right. Take your right hand, and as you twist, look to the left. And very gently, using your hands as needed, come into your twist. So you can use your right hand on top of your left knee or thigh and really look over towards that left hand. I like to keep the left arm stretched, extended, nice and open. And breathe. And we're going to come up and over to the other side. So legs fall over to the left as we look to the right. Bring your knees back to center. We're going to take our hands to our shins, and you can tuck your chin and rock back and forth. Give yourself a little bit of a massage here. And hug yourself nice and tight before extending into our Savasana, corpse pose. You can have your hands out to the side. You can also take your blanket, you can roll it up and you can place it underneath your knees. Sometimes that allows us a little bit more relaxation. So you guys are going to stay in your Savasana, eyes closed. And in your Savasana, just taking some time for yourself.
I don't know if anybody has any questions at all for Kara. Thank you so much for leading us through that yoga sequence.
We're going to come out of our Savasana. And so you can roll onto your side. And then come back up to a seated position. And I want to thank you so much for joining me today. And I'm happy to stick around and answer any questions. So thank you so much, and namaste.
Thank you so much, everybody, for joining us today for our June event. We hope that today's event helped you understand the basics of yoga and the benefits it can serve us as adoptees. I just wanted to let everyone know to please save the date for our annual Spotlight event that will be on Saturday, November 6th. More details to come soon, so make sure you follow us on social media for updates. We'll be dropping a Word document that Kara has put together in the chat of great resources she feels that could help if you want to continue learning more. So thanks so much, Kara, for joining us today. Bye. Have a good afternoon.